As an entrepreneur, should you run one business or run multiple businesses at the same time? The answer is, it actually depends. And in this video, I actually want to go deeper into this topic and share the lessons I've learned and how my, I would say, perspective has changed and is still changing over time as well. So back when I got started online, like I would say 20 years ago or so, I was working on a lot of different things, as a lot of startup entrepreneurs do, right? And I wouldn't even say multiple businesses because my attention was so scattered. Like I was like, oh, this is amazing. And I start building that. And then the next thing, I would say they're best described as like projects, right? Like it wouldn't even be a full, like it would be overstating if I would say there's businesses, right? And I would say at that phase where I was, again, starting out, doing essentially everything myself, right? There's no point in like doing multiple businesses because like if you focus all your attention across all these different things, like literally what I did is I started a project, build it up, and then my attention shifted to somewhere else. So automatically that first thing would just die. Like it just would not work. So if that's you and you're doing everything yourself, like definitely don't. I shouldn't even have to state that, right? But like don't do multiple businesses at the same time. And I know a lot of entrepreneurs do that. Like, oh, like what do you do? Oh, I got this business, I got that business, I got that business. Really? Because like if you're doing a lot of it, then you don't have, like you have projects, right? Or like brands or like whatever, like they're not actual businesses, right? Like you wouldn't be able to sell them to someone or like give them to someone and they would just keep on running. Like they're just like projects that you work on, right? So I think that's not the right thing to do, right? So, but because that was what I did initially, I did a lot of things, but none of those things got really far. Like none of them really got big, right? So at some point, like I remember at some point I was actually, what I was doing is I was literally launching new software products like every 6 months or so, right? Because I figured out like, hey, I know how to do marketing. I know how to put a new brand into the market, how to do a product launch. So I'm just going to do that. And, you know, yes, that worked pretty well, I'd say. But at the same time, like I was starting over every 6 months or 9 months or so, which is like not ideal, right? And at that time, I wasn't doing everything myself anymore, right? Like I had a team, I had like developers and whatnot, but like I was still doing all the marketing myself mostly. So even though I had help and even though each of those projects or even could actually be seen as a different business because they actually lived on after I started focusing on the next one, but it was a fire that would automatically burn out, right? Like it wouldn't keep on living, keep on growing after I diverted my attention, right? So at some point I decided enough was enough, right? Like I could just keep on doing this, but like, and it works, it pays the bills very well, but that was enough. This is not going to help me to the next level, right? So at some point I was just about to launch 2 products, right? Like similar fashion as before, which were Viral and Connectio, right? If you've been following me, you probably heard of them somewhere along the way, right? And right before I was going to launch them, which actually launched on this very same day, which is like for another day probably, but like I just decided like I'm going to stick with those. Like I'm just going to keep on focusing with those. So that had nothing to do with like this is the best idea I've had, because a lot of people say, it needs to be the best idea and that's what I'm going to focus on. No, absolutely nothing to do with that, right? All it did was like, I'm going to launch these anyway. I'm just going to figure out how to keep on growing these beyond just doing a big product launch where a lot of affiliates were promoting it and like doing a bunch of revenue in the first week. But afterwards, there was not a lot of sustainability afterwards that, right? So we launched that, both the Viral and Connectio, and I decided I'm just going to focus on that. And that's what I did. Initially, didn't know how to do evergreen marketing as like an ongoing basis, but figured out how to like make that work with affiliates. We figured out how to do that with content. Mainly, we figured it out using paid advertising, and we grew these businesses way further than I could have ever done when I was doing all these different projects, right? Because I only had to focus on 2 businesses. I was able to scale them beyond anything I've ever done before, right? Not going to go into the details, but like, let's just say, you know, we had clients in over 100 countries, had a team of over 45. I say had because I sold one of those businesses about a year, 2 years ago or so. And I would even go as far as saying that I probably could have made either one business bigger if I would have focused on only one. But me being me, I wanted to focus on 2 businesses. And the reason being is partially because it's fun, right? But also because of my rule of 50. My rule of 50 that I've always had, especially when I was starting out, is that I believe that nothing should be bigger than 50% in my business. And what I mean with that is like, if there is a single traffic source that is generating more than 50% of revenue in my business, like let's say, you know, Facebook ads is responsible for 80% of revenue, then that's a risk, right? And I wouldn't lower that, but I want to make sure that other traffic sources would go over 50% again, so that at least, you know, other traffic sources would go up, so that this primary one by default also is percentage-wise is going down. So that there's nothing more than 50% of my business. And this goes for traffic sources for like key person in your team, like a key client, maybe there's one client that's doing 70% of revenue, whatever it is. If there's something that's more than 50%, that is a risk, right? And I am more of a risk-averse entrepreneur. There's some that would just go all, put all the chips on green, and they either blow up or they go back to, you know, 0, right? Which I've been there, done that multiple times in my business back in the day. And that's not a place where we're going to go, right? I rather just keep on moving forward. So because of that, I decided to focus on 2 businesses. And running 2 businesses, right? If we're talking about the topic of like one versus multiple, running 2 businesses has its benefits, right? Has its downsides because you cannot focus on everything, but it also has its benefits because when you have synergy between your companies, what I mean is like, let's say you serve the same target avatar to the same client, then you can do, for example, cross-sell. Or if you operate in a similar kind of market or a similar kind of way of operating a business, you can also, for example, there's certain people in your business that you don't need 2 people for, you can only have 1 person. Or for example, you might only need 1 person that can do the thing for 2 businesses, right? For example, if you need a media buyer to run the ads, you can actually leverage that person for 2 businesses, which kind of means that, every business only has half of the cost to pay for, right? So there's definitely benefits of running 2 businesses, right? But I think a major difference and a major lesson I learned, I would say, is that the only way to truly run multiple businesses in a way that, like, let's go a little bit step back maybe. For most people in the first couple of years of entrepreneurship, like 1 business is where to go, right? You're not going to scale faster by running multiple businesses. You are definitely going to slow yourself down by running multiple businesses. For most people, there's just no point to run multiple businesses. Like, do one thing very, very well and go far with that. And don't think like, oh yeah, we're doing whatever 7 figures. We're going to start the next business because that's what's going to help us faster. No, like, it's way easier to go from a 7-figure to an 8-figure company, for example, than to go from 0 to a new 7 figures alongside, right? It just doesn't make any sense. With that said, there are very good cases, and this is something that I start to think more about as well, where it does make sense to have multiple businesses, but that can only be done when you have the right focus on each business, and that cannot be you. And that's the difference, right? The difference between running 1 or multiple businesses is that you should be able to have every business run independently of you. If that's you, that is when you can have multiple businesses, right? I learned to do this properly, I'd say even over the last year or a couple of years or so. Like, for example, last year, me and my wife went to Indonesia with our kids, and I went completely dark, completely offline for 3 months. Like, I'm not like, I still did some work in the evening, or I still checked in with the team. No, like, we have, as 20, 25 people on the team or so. Like, I had 0 calls with anyone during that 3-month period. Like, I just went offline, right? And the only reason why I'm able to do that is because of the awesome team that we have here at the bar. This is not credits to me. This is not credits because I'm not at all. This is definitely due to the team and the responsibility I'm giving to them. And it's only at that point that, like, when you have the right people that have the right attitude and the right skill set on the team, that's when it completely makes sense to run multiple businesses. This is what happens when you look at like for example, Siad Balki or many others, right? Like, everyone has seen Alex Hormozi recently, obviously. Like, that's what they do, is they just build a holding company, right? And they have all these different companies below that. Each of those companies is not just their company that they run. No, they have operators on each of those companies. And that's essentially a different game to play. The long story short, right, what I'm trying to emphasize here is that for a lot of businesses or a lot of business owners, they have multiple businesses, but they shouldn't, right? It's just a distraction. It's a complete distraction. They should just focus on one thing, make that exceptionally great, solve whatever problem you're solving, solve that in the best way possible, and scale that business, right? And then, yes, I totally realized I did the complete opposite. Like, I ran 2 businesses for like multiple years, which did well. But again, I believe they would have been bigger if I would have focused on a single thing and a single business, right? But we live and learn, right? But if you truly want to run multiple businesses, that's okay. You can do that. You don't have to wait for that. You can have like a holding company with all these different businesses below that. Totally okay. As long as you put the right operators in place, as long as you have the right team in each of those businesses, so that there's no shattered focus. Like, every business has its own, like, has people, skilled people with the right mindset and the right attitude that focus on those businesses and can help it grow further, right? And that's something I just wanted to share with all of you. Hopefully it's helpful to some of you. And yeah, hope you have an amazing day. Cheers. All right, cut. We're done here. Let's wrap it up. Oh, well, sorry. You're still there. Well, in that case, thanks for watching, and make sure to subscribe to my channel where I share marketing tips, tricks, and strategies that will help you grow your business faster. So you can click on the subscribe button right now or check out the next video. Either way, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.